for like maybe one person to get on here. You know what? I see one person on. So we about to do it. Right. Now I'm trying to record this video, but also trying to do it for Facebook as well as YouTube. But I might be trying to do too much, so we're gonna see how we get it done. But the reason why I wanted a lot of people to tune into this post is because I'm gonna be honest with you, I had a whole different format prepared, and I was gonna go into some things that had occurred this week. Like I said, the news cycle is moving so fast that it's almost hard to keep up with it. And I don't know whether y'all know it or not, but when I do these little videos, I put in a lot of research and time. I don't ever want to tell somebody something that's not true or fabricated or just straight out wrong. So I do a lot of research. So I had a whole format prepared because it was just some things that were going on this week. But like I said, the news right now, y'all have to understand we are living in history right now. So the news is moving so fast and so rapidly. As an example, this week, Uncle Ben's and Aunt Jemima have decided to stop basically using a derogatory image of black people to sell products. And a lot of people are going to say, well, Carlton, that's not really a big deal, this and that. But you gotta think about it. Uncle Ben's has been around for like 130 some years. Aunt Jemima as well. But with the turn and the tide of how things are going, these companies now are understanding that people of color are no longer going to take that. So if you have something derogatory or something that we don't agree with, it's the same with the NFL. It's the same with the NBA. It's the same with all these Fortune 500 companies. Now all this stuff is starting to happen. And, you know, I know my videos, a lot of time, I'm like really upset. And, you know, I'm letting out my feelings. And this and that. But you guys got to understand how things are moving so fast right now. And I'm sorry, somebody's calling me, but we're going to turn that off. And we're going to make sure that that does not happen again. I should have been more prepared for that. I apologize. But the news cycle is going so fast that, and it's because history is being made right now. Now, a lot of these companies doing this stuff that's going on, I really appreciate it. But don't think that blacks don't understand that once we made it known that, hey, if you keep doing the stuff you're doing, we just won't buy your rice, or we just won't buy your pancake mix, or we just won't buy your syrup. Blacks have very influential power as far as economics go. It's the same with Latinos. They are very influential. I don't know whether y'all know it or not, but if you look on back of most things that you buy at a grocery store, sometimes they have Spanish directions on them, because Spanish is Mexican and Latinos are one of the biggest growing minorities in the United States right now. That's a whole nother video. But anyway, what I wanted to do was, a friend of mine that I grew up with said, hey, when you get ready to do a video, don't just go live, tell people you're getting ready to go on. I put it out yesterday, but today I put out that, hey, if you had a question, this and that, sorry, Carla, this and that. If you had a question or something you wanted to talk about, that I would try to address it. And I thought maybe I'd get 1 or 2 questions, but you guys called my bluff and I got probably 12 questions. And I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. So of course I'm not going to be able to answer all 12 questions, but I will try to get to the majority of them because I don't want to keep y'all longer than about 30, maybe 20 minutes. All right. So the first question And these questions, I will not be reading the name because 3 of the people told me, please don't mention my name. I don't know whether they just didn't want people to know what was going on. If they had a question, they didn't want to seem like they were asking a silly question. And I'm going to be honest with you. I have always been taught that there is no such thing as a silly question. There's no such thing. Only an unasked question is a dumb question, basically. So if you don't know and you want to ask a question, ask a question. All right. So, and I got to be honest, there were a couple people that left me some questions that I was like, man, okay. And also a few questions that I will not be answering. Let me explain something to you. I'm doing this to enlighten people, to talk about my views, to talk about other people's views. I think a lot of people want to know perspective from a black person, a black male. So somebody sent me a question about when you DJ, why do you play old music? Hey, that's a whole nother video. I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about issues in the black community, politics, history, things like that. I'm not doing anything besides that. So if your question is unanswered, probably because it was not the format for it. All right. So I see, once again, we got a lot of people on here. So I'm going to start in with some of these questions, and I'm going to try to also be reading the comments. My eyes aren't good and I cannot remember where I put my glasses, but I will start reading some of these comments as I go. So the first question I got it was kind of funny. But the person asked me, are you doing this because you're going to school or to obtain a degree? Absolutely not. I do have some schooling. I do have some college, but I'm not doing it to obtain a master's degree or PhD or anything like that. That's not what I do it for. I do it because I have fallen in love with journalism. That's why I do the things that I do. And I also am a very staunch supporter of the movement that is going on right now. All right, so that was question number 1. Question number 2, that somebody, and this was an awesome question. I wish I could tell this person's name, but I don't want to tell their name. Someone said, can you please, I'm sorry. How is it that Trump lost the popular vote but is still elected president? This was one of the best questions out of all of the questions because I could not understand it either. So as I did some research, well, I couldn't understand it years ago, but I had to understand the Electoral College. So everybody's saying, hey, people tell us to go out and vote. Make your voice heard, go vote. But how is it that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but she lost and wasn't president? This is a great question. And the answer to that question is the Electoral College. And how the Electoral College works is that each state is given 2 congressmen, basically 2 senators. Every state has 2 senators. But based off the population of a state, you get representatives. So there's 535 representatives and senators, but there's also 3 from the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., which actually a lot of people don't know is not a state. It's District of Columbia. That's why it's called Washington, D.C. But anyway, how the Electoral College works is that you can have, every state has 2 senators, but you also have representatives. And when people go vote and when candidates are running, they're going to go to those states that have the most electoral votes. So in the case of Kansas, Kansas has 2 senators, but based off of their population, they have 4 representatives. So they actually have 6 electoral votes. That is what the candidates try to get, electoral votes. And that's why you always see them going to the big states like California, Texas, because they have huge electoral votes. California alone has 2 senators, but 53 representatives. So these representatives all are in different districts. They represent different districts. That is why Trump campaigns, or Biden campaigns, or whatever, that is why they go to these large states to campaign, because they are trying to get their representatives in place. So a representative can be a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. But what the presidents, or the incumbent president, or as Joe Biden is, the one who wants to become president, they go to these big states because they have to get the electoral vote. So when you and I go out and vote, yeah, our vote does matter. Our vote absolutely does matter. But what these guys are doing is they're trying to go get the most electoral votes. So in a nutshell, say Trump won 39 states, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he would actually win the presidency. You can actually, I'm sorry, I said that backward. You can actually lose in 39 states, but if you have enough of the big states, you can actually win. So therefore, in the case of Hillary Clinton, she had the most popular votes, but Trump had the biggest amount of electoral votes. And like I said, you have 538. So the magic number, when you guys are watching the election this year, you are looking for who gets to 270 or above. Once you get 270, that's it. That's the winner. So as these votes go on and these general elections go on and you're watching it all night long, once that person gets to 270, that other person has to succeed because they've lost. Once you have 270 votes, you've pretty much won. That is why it's an old system. And a lot of people don't feel like it's fair, and I don't feel like it's fair, because a lot of people now are trying to get people as far as popular vote. Everybody wants the popular vote. That's how it should be, and that's what I agree. The people should elect the leaders, not this age-old system of electoral votes, which is the Electoral College. But that was a good question. And one tidbit I did learn, and I actually did not know this, is that, say, like I said, in California, they have 55 electoral votes. If the Democrats lose that, it's not like it's split up and 30 votes go here and 22 votes go here. It doesn't work like that. If you lose in that state, all of those electoral votes go to that party that won. That is why it is so damn important to go out and vote. Because it doesn't split it down and say, hey, well, this guy won 30 and this guy won 20, so we're going to split it up. It doesn't work like that. And that's why it's an age-old system. You got to understand how these things work, people. If you lose that state, all 55 of those votes in California would go to the party that won it. That is why our vote absolutely does matter. How it's tallied up is a little strange, but it absolutely does matter. Go out and vote. And as far as the census, you need to make sure if you get a letter from the census, you need to reply to it. Census is taken every 10 years, and that is how they start moving electorals. They go up 3, maybe 4 or 5. It's not a huge amount, but if you start taking census and answering the questions and turning it in, you can do it over phone, internet, whatever. You can start changing the Electoral College and the amount of votes that a state has. But again, that was an awesome question. That was an awesome question. I really do appreciate that question. Next question I got, I think we're on question 3, was why do we actually celebrate the 4th of July? And this person said they are thinking about not celebrating the 4th of July this year. Well, the first thing I want to say is I'm in total agreement with you. I will not be celebrating the 4th of July this year. I will be celebrating Juneteenth. I'm sorry I didn't do it before, but I will not be celebrating 4th of July. But anyway, that's a whole nother video too. But People celebrate the 4th of July because it is basically the declaration. It's supposed to be when the United States was actually born. And to go back in history, the United States was born because people over in England didn't like the rule. They didn't like what was going on over there. They came to the United States. They formed colonies, this and that. Of course, everybody knows there was 13 original colonies. But on the 4th of July, 1776, these original colonies signed the Declaration of Independence, was basically declaring their independence as a sovereign nation, their own nation, and that is why it's considered the birth of the United States. I can respect that, but it was the birth of the United States, but it was back in 1776, so we've been catching hell ever since then. So it was not Declaration of Independence for blacks. At that time, we were probably being brought over to this country to be enslaved and everything else. So it's not for me to tell somebody to celebrate or not to celebrate. I'm just saying, for me, as far as this time in my life, I can respect the 4th of July, but it holds less meaning now for me. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of slack from that. Everybody can say, how can you do that, this and that, but that is just my personal opinion. Believe me, I'm a person that served the military. I served my country. I did everything that I needed to do. I'm a law-abiding citizen, but you can't treat us like this and then expect us to celebrate our bondage. I hope you will understand that. If y'all got more questions, please let me know. But hold on. What is Juneteenth? Oh, I'm sorry. For those that don't know what Juneteenth is is basically when blacks, the remaining slaves that were still slaves, it was when we became free, basically. It's also called Freedom Day. And that's why this happened on June 19th, 1865, I believe it was. June 19th, 1865. That is when the last remaining slaves that were enslaved, and I think it was speech was given in Galveston, Texas, but it basically said any slaves that still remained, you were no longer a slave. But again, y'all know how that went. So, but yeah, Juneteenth, it's not recognized as a national holiday yet, but I have a strong feeling that this will probably be the last year that it is not recognized as a national holiday. And they should give us that. Black History Month, come on, man. Come on, man. Juneteenth needs to become a national holiday. And us as people, we can make that happen. But I got a strong feeling it will probably happen and become a national holiday. But anyway, very good question. Somebody else had hit me up with a question, basically saying they were watching the news today and what was the big uproar about DACA. For those that don't know, DACA, and I can be real quick with this one, DACA is Deferred Attention for Childhood Arrivals. So basically what DACA was saying, and these people are known as dreamers, is because if you were an immigrant and you were brought over to the country while you were a child and you grew up in this country, this is the only country you know. So even though you might have migrated from Guatemala, New Mexico, or New Zealand, or Australia, or Africa, if you were brought over to this country and you have lived a certain amount of time, you now fall under DACA, which was created by, it was put in place by President Obama. But it basically says Trump's opposition for DACA is that he wants to end DACA. So basically, if you weren't born in this country, this and that, you have to go back to your country of origin, and you have to go through all of these hoops, and it's just a mess, because he feels as though if you weren't born in this country, you're not necessarily American. Which is funny, because his wife was not born in this country. But since he's the president and he's rich, those rules don't apply to him or his family. It only applies to others. That's why I say, people, Trump is always about himself. Even though his wife is not from this country, DACA should not apply. If you want to get rid of it, then you need to send your wife back to where she's from. And I don't know where she's from. I didn't look it up. I don't go all into all of that. But that's what DACA was about. But the Supreme Court today ruled down that Trump was trying to end DACA, and he cannot. Not the way he was trying to do it. And it's funny because one of the people that he elected to the Supreme Court sided against the Republicans and President Trump and basically said, hey, if you're born in this country, whether you were born here or brought here, you fall under DACA, you're a dreamer. You don't have to keep going through all of this right now. I'm sure he will, if he gets reelected, he will try to end DACA again. But that's why, again, we must go out and vote. Especially if you are a minority or if you have people that are not naturalized citizens of the United States, you must go out and vote. If you fall under DACA, you can stay here, and every 2 years you just have to go through a little bit of paperwork, but you can stay here to study, you can stay here to work, you pay taxes, you do all of this. So you're a citizen. You're a citizen. But again, another good question. Fourth question I had is, how many blacks are in Washington in major politics? I think the person kind of worded the question, but I think I know what they were saying. And I hope I'm answering this question right to this person. The House of Representatives has plenty of minorities. This is probably the best House of Representatives that we have because it is a representation of the United States. That's why now we have Muslims, we have Sikhs, we have blacks, whites, Indians, Muslim. The House of Representatives is a cornucopia of different races. That is how it should be. It should also be that way in the Senate, but you guys know it's not like that in the Senate. The Senate is a picture or a photo of the past, because who is in the Senate? Older white males. That's basically who's in the Senate. The House of Representatives is a representation of the United States, but in the Senate, you know who runs the Senate. Older white males. So if you're asking that question, how many blacks are in the Senate? I can tell you, this was an easy one to research. There is one. There is one black in the Senate, and he is a Republican, and that is Tim Scott of South Carolina. One. So even though the House can bring up laws, they can start impeachments, they can, these laws have to go to the Senate to be approved, and you already know who's all over Trump's. You already understand how this works. And in the previous video, I explained how even though Trump was impeached, he is still in office because the impeachment went to the Senate and the Senate's just knocked it down. They were like, hey, we're not going to impeach our president. Again, must go vote. You must get these senators out of here. The Senate should be a direct representation. It should be mirroring the House of Representatives. You should have blacks, whites, Indians, Mexicans, Latinos. You should have all groups, races making these laws and approving these laws. But who is in the Senate? Republicans, Donald Trump's party, and they're no longer the Republicans of 20 years ago. They are Trump loyalists. So if something goes to the Senate, if Trump doesn't like it, he tells them, hey, I don't like that. Knock it down. And it gets knocked down. Mitch McConnell does not go against President Trump. Mitch McConnell is the leading Republican in the Senate. You already know how that goes. That's why these presidents go and campaign for these senators and representatives. Like I said, they want to get as many as they can on their side. But again, you have to start seeing how this stuff works. But yeah, Tim Scott is the only black Republican in the Senate. Wow. I could talk about that for hours, but I'm not even going to go there. God bless you, Tim Scott. Bruh. Whatever. But as far as in Trump's cabinet, Here's another staggering fact you might not know. He has one person in his cabinet. Ben Carson. Ben Carson. And I don't mean to segue too hard, but for y'all that don't understand, Ben Carson was a presidential candidate. And man, let me back up. I promise I'm gonna get to these two questions before I end this. But let me explain to you about Ben Carson. Ben Carson was a neurosurgeon. This man probably went to school for 12 years. Do you understand neurosurgery? Combining and working with veins and inhibitors in your brain. And I mean, to be a neurosurgeon, you have to be gifted. You have to be gifted. Ben Carson was a neurosurgeon. Matter of fact, I might be wrong, but I think there's a movie called The Gifted Hands of Ben Carson. It's based off of Ben Carson. This man was a neurosurgeon. I think he performed the first successful separation of conjoined twins. Do you got to understand the talent this man has to have to do the things that this man did? He's separated conjoined twins. He was one of the first ones. He did a neurological procedure on a fetus. This man is brilliant. And you know what his position is in the Trump cabinet? Secretary of HUD, Housing and Development. That's what his position is. I'm trying not to get pissed off, but again, you guys got to read and you guys got to disseminate how this man works. This guy is gifted. I'm going to be honest with you. He should be the Surgeon General or he should be running the country. If you're going to be up in there, you're a neurosurgeon. You ran for the presidency. You made all these groundbreaking surgeries. You're gifted and this and that. And this is the respect that the president gives you. Hey, man. You want to control HUB, urban and housing development. If that ain't a slap in the face, and people want to say, oh, well, Trump's not a racist. Really? Really? Housing and urban development? Oh, man. I digress. I'm sorry. That's a whole nother video. And I'm not going to go into that right now because I'll get pissed off. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to answer these people's questions because y'all took the time to send me these questions. All right. Let me get back. Oh, this was a good question. And this was sent to me by a younger person. Are there any black people representative on U.S. money? This was a great question because not only am I a journalist, but I collect coins and all of that. That's another video. But anyway. But they said, are any blacks listed on money? In direct representation, no. No blacks on money. Now, they said a couple years ago, it came out that Harriet Tubman was to be put on the $20 bill, I think it was. And you see that has yet to happen. I think that was announced maybe 8 years ago. And it hasn't happened yet, so don't hold your breath on that. But as far as direct representation on the front of a bill, no. However, on the $2 bill, on the back of a $2 bill, okay, I got to be careful how I say this because I don't want to get killed. But what I will say is that the sign on the back of the $2 bill, it's a painting which is a depiction of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. However, anyone that has ever been in the fraternity, the Fraternal Order of the Masons, may understand that the signing of the Declaration of Independence was also at the end of a Mason meeting. And you might ask, well, Carlton, how could you possibly know that? Because at one time I was a Mason. But again, that's a whole nother video. But on the back of the $2 bill, there's a painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And I just happen to have a $2 bill right here. And I want to show y'all. And I hope I can show y'all this. I want to get in here. Let me see if I can get this. This is going to be hard. But you see where that arrow is? And when you get a chance, look at the $2 bill. Where that arrow is, and that's kind of hard. I can't get it into focus real good. But when you get a chance, look at the back of the $2 bill. And in the left corner, there is a gentleman who, besides all of these other people on this $2 bill, is noticeably darker than the other people. Now, a lot of people assume that this was John Hanson. A lot of people assume it was John Hanson. And for y'all that don't know, and again, a lot of our history is hidden. You have to search for it. You have to search for Black history. And that's another thing that irritates me. I find out stuff, I learn something every day, but it's another thing that irritates me. You have to search hard for Black history. But John Hanson was actually a Black man. And he is credited with being, well, he's not even credited with it because they try to hide the fact. But from 1781 to 1782, John Hanson held the position of President of the United States in Congress assembled. Blowing your mind, huh? President of the United States in Congress assembled. You got to understand, think back what I just told you guys. The Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. John Hanson, from 1781 to 1782, 1 year, was actually the first president. Blowing your mind, huh? Was the first president. And everybody's going to say, well, that's impossible. George Washington was the first president. George Washington, learn your history. George Washington became the first, he was recognized as the first president, but he was elected in 1789. 1789. Unless my math is wrong, that's 7 years after John Hanson. And John Hanson was definitely a Black man. If you doubt what I'm saying, just go ahead and research it. It'll be hard to find, but go ahead and research it. He was the president of the United States. He was the first president of the United States, but he is not given that title because it was the original colonies, and he only held that position for 1 year. And then after that, they didn't have another president until George Washington in 1789. I'm blowing your mind, huh? It blew my mind when I first learned about it. But anyway, but a lot of people argue the fact that it was not John Hanson on that dollar bill, that some people say it was Prince Hall, who was basically the founder of the first Black Masons. He was the founder of Prince Hall affiliated Masons. Again, I'm not trying to get too deep in it because Masons they're about their stuff. So, hey, I'm just giving you basic information. But a lot of people, even in the history books, try to say, no, it wasn't a Black guy. It was Robert Morrison. It's Robert Morrison, who is a white congressman. It's not a Black guy. But I find it hard to believe on a $2 bill, you took time to paint all these faces white, but on that one gentleman, his face is Black. That's why I totally debunked the fact that it was Robert Morrison. That on that $2 bill is either Prince Hall or the first president, John Hanson. And a lot of people will say, I think the biggest argument is that, no, I mean, photography wasn't even back then. So, how could it? Well, I already told you it was a painting. It wasn't a photograph. It was a painting, which means the guy that painted it was there. So again, I don't believe that out of all of these faces on here that he made this one face Black as an error. Come on, I'm not falling for that. Not falling for that. But again, what I'm telling you guys, do your research. You do your research. And that is what I love about the things that I'm doing. I am too am learning, just like y'all. I too am learning. How much time we got? I think I got enough time for maybe 2 more questions. This was a good question that was sent to me like a couple minutes before I went on, or that's when I noticed it. How does the Black community feel about mixed races, and what is the best way for Caucasians to support Black Lives Matter movement? To the person that sent me this message, and you know who you are, I really appreciate that question. Because if you're asking it, I know there's a lot of other Caucasian people that are asking the same question. As far as mixed races, hey man, the Black community, most of us, we don't have no problem with mixed races. We don't have no problem with mixed races. LGBT community, mixed races, this movement is way bigger than that. We are over that. Most Black people are like, hey, love who you want to love, including me. Love who you want to love. So as far as mixed races, I don't think we have any problem with that. Every time I go down and help protest, I see plenty of mixed couples, and I love it. I love it. Love is love, man. But as far as what can you do to support the Black Lives Movement matter, actually, and I don't want to say her name, keep doing what you're doing. Opening up dialogue. But to me, I can't speak for a white person or a Caucasian person, but if you're thinking about it, that's a good thing. So when you sit down with your family or your friends and you know, and it's a whole group of Caucasians, bring it up. Bring it up. The only thing I will tell you is you probably get a lot of different, you know, opinions on it, but bring it up and see how people feel. But Caucasians right now are feeling a lot of shame, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I get it. They're feeling a lot of shame because when you're seeing the stuff that is going on and all these instances of racism and now it's on video and this and it blows your mind. You're like, no way this has been happening, and I've been turning my head on it. You no longer can do that. It is no longer enough for you to say, hey, I have Black friends and everything, I'm not a racist. It is no longer acceptable to do that. I'm being so sincere. You have to be anti-racist now. You have to be anti-racist. You can't say, hey, I got Black friends, I'm not a racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to be. You can no longer turn your head and say, hey, it doesn't affect me. I have Black friends. I don't think I'm a racist. So I just don't want to see what's going on about that. But when you have to see that George Floyd video, you cannot turn your head anymore. You can't turn your head anymore. You have to accept the fact that this is what is going on. And it's been going on for generations. For generations. So I appreciate your question, and I really feel like if you're doing self-reflection of yourself and saying, hey man, how can I support it? By having an open mind, by not assuming things, by wanting to discuss it. And I tell you, if you're good friends with a person, and me and you, we were cool. We were cool. And we are cool. So if you got a question, man, text me. You still got my number. Inbox me just like you did now. Hey, Carlton, I seen this on the news. What is your feelings on that? Am I right to think this way or that way? We can have a dialogue. It won't make me feel any less. And that's what a lot of people, white people, do not get. It is not that we all of a sudden now what I'm doing and I'm supporting the Black movement, I don't have white friends anymore. Absolutely not. Some of my best friends are white. Tony Harvey, one of my biggest fans. I love you, brother. But I really think that man doesn't have a racist bone in his body. But it doesn't mean that I don't respect and love my white friends. I have white people in my family and everything. I still love and respect y'all. You just have to understand at this point in time, you can no longer say, hey, I got Black people in my family. I got Black friends, this and that. I'm not a racist. You can't do that. You need to say, hey, I am against racism. Your friends start talking about it, and they start talking about, hey, I don't understand why these blacks are acting this way. And you need to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't know if we can really talk about that in that context, because we're not them. We don't understand how this has been going on. Have you seen these videos? And again, it could cause a lot of strife within you and your family or your group of friends or your group that you associate with, but you're opening up that dialogue. And for you to say, you know what? I no longer think so close-minded like that. I think these people have the right to protest, and I think they're doing it the best way they know how, and I think they want to be heard. I think they want to be treated equal. Just you trying to change or start a dialogue like that, that is what you can do to support the Black Lives Movement. That is what you can do. And that was a beautiful question, and I appreciate you for it. I'm trying not to say your name. I don't want it to slip out. And my last question. I purposely saved this question for last. What is systemic racism? I know y'all probably hear this on the news. You hear it on the radio. You hear it on this. You hear it on that. You people talk about it. Anchors, this and that. What is systemic racism? I'm going to be as quick as possible. I think I can wrap this up in about 2 minutes. Systemic racism is the system and structures that have procedures or processes that disadvantage African Americans. So, for it always seems like it is someone that is not a person of color to say it is no way that systemic racism exists. I can make this, again, I could talk about this for probably all day. I could do a video for about 5 hours. But in a nutshell, systemic racism is programs, systems, and structures that have procedures and processes that disadvantage African Americans. And the only thing I disagree with is I don't say just African American. I say people of color. I say people of color. Because if you think our Latino brothers and sisters, our Muslim brothers and sisters, our South African brothers and sisters, if you think that racism doesn't occur with them, it does. Our Oriental brothers and sisters, people of color. So that's the only part I disagree with it. But it is systems that are in place that cause you to be disadvantaged. And anybody that says systemic racism does not exist, I challenge you. You can come to my home. We can do a live watch party, whatever, and I will blow you away. Systemic racism absolutely does exist. Anything that disadvantages blacks, it exists. And I wanted to give you a few examples of systemic racism. Law enforcement, incarceration rates, felony rates, sentencing. As far as economic systemic racism, segregation, the income gap between people of color and Caucasians, lending practices, mortgage rates, wages. These are systems that are in place to disadvantage blacks. Do you know that blacks, on an average of 75%, usually have a higher APR on their mortgage than a person of non-color? Usually have a higher APR. And to some people, you know why that's a big deal, this and that. Because the same house that I want to get and the same house that a white person wants to get, I might get a higher rate. Now for that house that's $100,000, I end up paying $200,000 over the life of the loan. Where if a person that is not part of systemic racism, I'm trying to watch my words, that person gets a great rate. So now for that $100,000 house that I'm paying $200,000 for because I got a shitty rate, that person got a great rate, and now they're only paying $120,000 for their house. But I had to pay $200,000 for my house. This is how systemic racism works. there are systems in place. And when I say, as far as law enforcement, I don't need to go into incarceration rates, how many people are in jails. Once you have a felony, you no longer can vote. And see, you guys got to see the big picture on how things. Did it ever occur to you that maybe blacks are judged more harshly and go to jail for stuff that a white person may not go to jail for, and now they're in jail, now they have a record, now they have a felony, now you can't vote. Now you can't vote. So you can't change. You no longer have a voice to change your leaders in this. So see, it's way bigger than people understand. It is way bigger than people understand. The income gap. And so many people were like, well, you got to get out there and get a job, this and that. You and I all know that it's a lot easier for two guys. Hey, we're buddies, this and that. We go golf together, and we're friends. Hey, you know what? There's a position at my job. Why don't I go ahead and get you in there? And why don't I go ahead and promote you a year later? And why don't I go ahead and promote you a year later, and now you're running the company? Because me and you are buddies. We're the good old boys. We're the good old boys. Whereas that black man that's been at that company for 12 years, he ends up working for that guy that's been at the company 2 years. These are systems that are in place to disadvantage certain races. Again, I could talk about this for hours, but trust me, those people that always get on the news or always get on the radio or even talk to other people, well, I just don't believe systemic racism exists. Bullshit. You need to call them on it. Or if you can't explain it to them, give them my number and tell them to call me. And I don't care who they are. I don't care if they're a scholar. I don't care if they're a mayor. I don't care if they've been in the military and they're a general. Tell them to call me. And I welcome anyone to debate me on this. Systemic racism, which is basically institutionalized racism, absolutely exists. Absolutely. Even in academia, which basically is scholastic. They won't even give us our representation in history, where blacks have helped develop this country. Inventions, Madam C.J. Walker, and light bulbs and stoplights and traffic lights, things that you use every day. You have no idea that blacks helped create it because they hide us from history. They don't want you to see the impact that blacks and people of color have made. Again, I could talk about this for hours, but don't sit there and don't buy into that hype that systemic racism does not exist. It absolutely exists. And I gave you the example of Ben Carson, but I want to give you one more example, and so I can give it to you in simplest terms. Thomas Edison is credited with making electricity, light bulbs, everything. He is credited with probably we'd be using matches and lanterns right now if it wasn't for Thomas Edison. But what you don't know is that Thomas Edison, when he created the light bulb, the light kept glowing. It would only last for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes and it would blow. He could not figure out what was going on. Do you know a black man came up with a filament? You know when a light bulb blows and that little piece flicks and then it doesn't work? He gave him a filament and he said, hey, why don't you try this? And Thomas Edison tried it and the light bulb stayed lit for hours and hours. Now you got to understand this was back in the day, but it stayed lit for hours. It vastly improved the light bulb, something that we use every day. How come you don't know about that black man that helped create the light bulb? Because systemic racism does not want you to know the contributions that inventors have made for this country. The ironing board, the stoplight, air conditioning. Think about that. Think about that. You got to understand how this game has been disadvantaged for blacks. You have to think about it. So, I'm not going to end on a negative note because right now I'm actually happy. When I watch news and I'm seeing all these things that are changing and all these celebrities coming out and all these people protesting together peacefully and all these laws being changed and this and that, it's exciting. It's exciting. I keep telling y'all, we are living in history right now. This will never happen again. It will never happen again. And that is why this movement is way past George Floyd now. It has momentum. It will not stop. It will not stop for years. I hate to blow your mind and I hate to piss some people off. This is going to go on for years. But the changes that are coming about already that we have seen, think about that. Think about that. We are living in history. This will never happen again. That's why for us to stop it, don't stop it. Vote. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep supporting protesters. Protest peacefully. But right now, we got momentum. And we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. And we're going to keep getting these leaderships. And we're going to keep getting these young people being active. And these young people voting. And we're going to get that man out of the White House. And we're going to get somebody, hey man, I love Joe Biden. He's not the greatest pick for me. He really isn't. But he is twice as better as that racist that we have in the White House right now. Twice as better. You know it and I know it. And I have white friends that tell me, hey man, you gotta look at the economy. He's doing a great job with the economy. How can you have a president of the United States that is a racist? But because he has a good economy for those of power, you can push aside his character. You can push aside the fact that he lies. You can push aside the fact that he's a racist. You can push aside the fact that he's trying to separate and divide our country. You can push aside that because the economy is great. Come on, man. Start thinking, start seeing how the game is played. And I'm going to have another video for y'all. And the title of that video is going to be Understanding the Game. I've just scratched the surface of what I need to be putting out there. But anyway, I love y'all. I appreciate y'all tuning in with me, giving me your time. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to be here with me. And I love you for that. Thank you.